All right, so I have to apologize. I am sorry we're late. I'm sorry we're late, but I have a reason why, which we will discuss as we discuss the book. I will introduce once again, everyone, the beautiful Miss Tessa Mossy is joining us for the final live for The Handmaid's Tale. She was here the other two. Team, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited because I'll be able to see the comments today, which is...
yeah, exactly. Tessa's finally going to get to see the comments, so she'll get to participate in the way that we want her to.
I don't know, I felt like I was losing my mind, like talking to myself. Anyway.
All right, yes, we're together today, finally. So... we have a lot to say about this book. We have a lot that we want to dive into and talk about. Tessa has things that she's been telling me for the last week that she forgot to bring up last time or that she kept wanting to bring up. So we're going to start right off the bat because an hour is not enough to talk about the rest of this book. So we're going to really dive right in. Tessa, if you're reading this, you rock as Jenny.
Aw, that's so nice. Thanks, Rita.
So Tessa has a couple of notes. T, I'm going to let you just dive right in.
Right, okay. So maybe I'll start with body language.
Yeah. Can I lead into this?
Yeah, please do.
So we know that one of the themes of our dystopian novels that we've been reading is the use of language. We know another one, and we know that that's a big one. We say that their language is limited, their language has changed in the way they have to refer to people in this book. And Tessa had commented to me, I think even before the first live, something about what she felt like body language, and then went into there. So I'm going to let her now take it.
Right. So I feel like I had a quote that led into this, but I'm just going to bring up, basically, I find a lot of the way that they start to be able to control the way these women think and feel is by telling them certain things to do with their body first. And it ends up making a physical action that then starts to create the way of thinking, the way of feeling because it's completely linked, right? So once you start doing something with your body, your mind follows suit. It's like they're completely connected.
The mind-body connection that you've seen me and Diego talk about, and you've seen pretty much a lot of artists talk about how to find characters or to find things, they look for it in themselves and the way they carry themselves.
Yeah, and it can go either way, right? So it can be, it's like anything. If you are feeling down, sometimes it'll then turn into like a physical sickness and vice versa. And the way they're doing, making the handmaids bow their heads. So look at that, like, body language.
Yeah, everyone, I want you to take this as an experiment. I want you to stand up right now and literally bring all of your attention into the center. Your head, your shoulders, let your chest kind of sink a little bit. When you feel that,
it's like the shoulders round, the head is down. You don't make eye contact with anybody. Nobody makes eye contact with you to register that you are there, that you exist, that you are a person. And then when your shoulders are rounding, it's this closed off position from the world. So,
and literally, you can't even take up space like that. You look like you're trying to disappear.
It's basically a way of starting to disappear. And then when you do the opposite, when you bring your shoulders back, when you lift your head, when you feel like you actually exist in the space.
And you can take up space.
People register you as existing in the space. Like, they don't make eye contact. That's not an accident. And that creates a sense of importance, a sense of existence, a sense of confidence. So all of this is very much, it's not just...
it's like you're not there. Exactly.
It's like you're not there. And so...
it's a surrender position. You're right. They make them complicit and submissive in every way, body language included. It's all just methods to let them know their new place. They are seen as merely vessels.
Yeah.
And this is something, just on a side note, tangent, something for all of you to be aware of. If you're ever in a place where you're nervous and you need to feel confident, start with your body. Take a position that's more confident. Take up space and be proud of it, and then you'll be amazed by how quickly your mind starts to shift into that.
It is such a great tool for mental health and well-being to find that connection and to know not only how it can affect you, but how you can use it to what?
I guess that's why our drama teacher tells us to imagine balloons are holding us up. And then we're seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're literally taking up more space. Here I'm minimizing that amount. Even like the amount of breath I'm getting, it all comes from here, not from...
Right.
Yeah.
And it's something we use in yoga all the time. So like every different pose is supposed to make you feel a certain way. So you feel that opening up. And that's why it's not just like BS where they're like, oh, and then this helps open up your heart. Like it literally does. Like you're literally opening this section of your chest, and it makes you just feel more open, more receptive to the world. So it's not. It is scientifically backed, and this is why they would use that technique.
But then you brought up something that really affected you in your youth,
right?
And I think I really want you to talk about that because that's something I think is very important. So.
And okay, cool, yes. And then the last part about that is the connection that I always use as an example is like, say you are thinking about something in your mind that's very stressful or gives you some sort of anxiety. The physical connection to that is that your heart starts increasing. So your heart starts to beat a little faster, and that's that perfect example of mind connected to body and how you can't separate the two. I mean, that's how we survive, you know? Mm-hmm. Okay,
but
yeah.
You talked about the...
I know. I was just like, I wanted to use that one more.
Okay, so...
Sorry. Okay, so the dress code in Handmaid's Tale, we talked about it a bunch. But I found this to hit home a bit because I grew up as a dancer, so I was always like using my body and really comfortable with it and thinking about more like how can I get stronger, how can I get more range of motion, how like I thought of it more as what I could do with my body. And then junior high school, the girls had a dress code. The guys could kind of wear whatever they wanted, but the girls had a dress code, and it was basically like you have to cover certain areas of your body because it's too distracting for the men. And I'd never thought of my body in that way before because I was so young. Like, sorry, I just have to cough here. I was so young that I hadn't thought about myself as that my body could mean those type of things. I always dressed myself as in terms of what I wanted to do with my body, how I wanted to be able to move in this space, or what would help me focus on whatever. Like it was more so what I wanted to get from my clothes as opposed to what I didn't want to have happen by me wearing something. And
just what we're saying is like the minute you're making people be conscious of the wardrobe choices they make and telling them that some of them are wrong or bad and that their body's the reason why, it puts them in a space where they feel like they can't take up as much space, I think.
Yeah. I started feeling so different about what my body meant, and it no longer felt like it was this thing where I didn't feel as strong in it. I felt really self-conscious, actually. And I remember then getting to high school, we were actually allowed to wear shorts again. And I thought, well, it's such a risk to wear shorts that you must have to have like a really good body in order to wear shorts. So I never wore them. I know. And then I the really, the really, what I thought were like the really pretty girls would all wear shorts. I'm like, oh, I'm probably not tan enough because they're all tan. That's what like crazy. And it's just like, that's all that came from the dress code. And yeah, let's see.
And it seems like a lot of you have, luckily the schools I've been to didn't have a dress code, but in school, shorts are allowed for girls, but not for guys. I mean, vice versa, for guys, but not for girls. Yeah. I'm from the UK, and we had dress codes too. It made me feel like we weren't all equal. We were allowed to wear skirts, but they had to be a certain length. It was like there was no sense of individuality.
Right.
When I talked about it with my professors, they told me I was trying to force a wrong lifestyle. What?
Yeah, but it is like...
Well, I mean, even to the point of the book in the men, the way that they dress the men, the military uniforms adorned with things that kind of made them seem not only buttoned up, but like they held the rule of law. They were the things you know what I mean? Because of the way everything about that was subversive in this book, which I thought was...
Yeah, and I find, because like I have nieces who are now entering into the grades where they have to wear dress codes, and I think at least we were talking about this, at least having the awareness, because I didn't have it when they started telling me what to wear, and I think that's why it affected me so much, because it started as a subconscious thing, and then it felt very much a part of me when I would dress after that, because I felt actually affected by this. Whereas if we have the awareness going into it, I feel like it can affect you less. Can you explain that a little bit better than I'm doing?
Certainly.
Like,
I was reading comments.
Right. Like, for anyone who's now experiencing this, to, like, now with my awareness, if someone's telling me what to wear, I don't allow that to affect how I feel about myself.
Well, you have a separation now. You're like, I know you're telling me what to wear because of your weakness, not because I'm doing anything wrong by wearing what I wear.
Right, and I think that would have helped me. I think it's really great when now people are speaking out about it, and it's starting to change. I don't think people are just... I don't think dress codes are as much of a... they're not done without thought, like they...
I want to read this comment real quick. So she says, the thing that made me so angry about it was that the female teachers were saying that girls aren't allowed to wear certain things because their body is distracting and sensual, not like boys' bodies. Okay, this is now going to tie into another part of the book. How many of you guys, I'm not tired, guys. Thank you.
It's the lighting.
It's the lighting, and you guys are making me feel like I look bad now.
No, you don't.
Anyways, so... did everyone read the historical notes after the book? Did you guys read this book cover to cover? Or did you guys think the book is over? I'm not reading the last 6 pages. Because I would say the reason we were late was because we didn't read the last 6 pages. And then we were like, oh, crap.
I honestly, well, yeah.
Did everyone read the end? Yes, you read it. Good. Maddie McCall, love that. Annie Hansen, did you read it, or is that you did? Yes, almost didn't. Glad I did. Kat Parker, I'm glad you did too. Thank you. You guys are awesome.
Yeah.
Noon, Natalia, you didn't read it. Natalia,
if you didn't read it, just know that there is a beautiful thing waiting for you in this book that we will talk about a bit, but I think it'll give you a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know, because I think what you're saying...
It'll calm your anxieties a little bit.
Calm anxieties, but there's one thing they talk about in the historical notes. So, for the people that didn't read the historical notes, what did you think of the ending of the book? And this will actually tie into 1984 as well, which I'm going to read you a part there. I agree, Lopresti Mariana. I just want to have dinner with Margaret Atwood and talk to her for days. I read it after this live, and now I feel bad. I will read it after this live. I know Kat Fernandez.
Don't feel bad.
Don't feel bad. It's just, it illuminates a lot.
Yeah,
and it's really cool.
It's
okay, Triforce of Dragons, things that ended abruptly and frustratingly. The very end, I have given myself away into the hands of strangers because it can't be helped. So I step up into the darkness within, or else the light. She distanced herself. Interesting. Pissed at the ending. All right. Nick saved her. Cliffhanger. Horrible. Saludar. Oh, hi. I feel like they stole a part very important of the story. The ending was very ambiguous, though. I need to know if Luke is alive. Luke is not alive.
Babe.
I don't think Luke is alive.
Oh my God. Don't
I think he's dead.
It's fact.
They said it was... Okay.
Improbable. They said improbable.
What happened with June? Good question. Let her talk. I read this historical notes, but I don't think it really explains what happened. It's like Margaret Atwood gives a lot of scenarios of what could have happened. Well, actually, in Margaret Atwood's... So there is an article that Margaret Atwood wrote for the... I forgot it's on my phone. That Margaret Atwood wrote for The Guardian, where she says, "My hero, George Orwell," by Margaret Atwood. In it, she speaks to the way in which 1984 influenced her, especially the end. In the end of 1984, when we read about Winston moving on and whatever, she says the way it's written is as if it is looking back at that point in time, not as if it's in the present. In the present. Okay.
That's cute. Yeah, so we basically had to dig in to do some some research on what the ending meant according to Margaret.
To Margaret Atwood, she thinks the ending of the book is actually very hopeful. It's at a time when Big Brother actually has fallen. Winston did achieve something. He didn't just die. He moved forward with the regime. And in...
We're not talking... Did you specify what book you're talking about?
Yeah, that 1984.
Okay,
Winston.
sorry. Just making sure.
You didn't read 1984 yet? I gotta read it. I want to read it again this year. It was so good. I'm just gonna read you guys the opening. It's just easier. Of this. Just so you guys get a point here. So the historical notes on The Handmaid's Tale, it makes us think. I kind of regret watching the TV show reading the book because I expected the same thing as a TV show to be in the show. Like, they barely know about what happens to the LGBT community in Gilead. So many parallels. But in it, she's hopeful about 1984. She's like, Orwell wasn't a man without hope. He had so much faith in the human spirit and the resilience of humanity that it would get past even what looks like the most destructive of regimes. In The Handmaid's Tale's historic notes, we find the same out. That the book we just read is actually an account given by a handmaid named Offred. We don't know her real name, which we all know that. We never find out for sure. Gave it on cassette tapes, and historians in the year 2195 are talking about having found these tapes and transcribed them. What?
I was just thinking it makes so much sense why she never said her name in the book ever. Because she did tell people in that time, she told people, but she couldn't say it because she was reading these on...
She was looking back at her life, recording her story so that people can study it later. They don't know what happens to Offred. They tell us. They're like, Offred, we don't know if she escaped. We do know that Nick was part... I don't want to ruin this for you guys if you haven't read it. That's the problem. Because it's really important. It really tells you what this book really is. Margaret Atwood doesn't...
A lot of it is...
hearsay, but in essence, we know that whole Gileadian regime is down. It's gone. And now, in the future, in the year 2195, people are looking back and studying that period of history, which doesn't have a lot said about it because, like 1984, they did as much to destroy that history as possible within the regime. It's really cool to read because Margaret Atwood also leaves us on a hopeful note. Also, like George Orwell, she has a very strong belief in the resiliency of the human spirit. In that we will overcome this bad thing that happened to us.
We're just like, we need to talk about it.
What?
We do need to talk about the notes.
The notes? Okay, let's talk about them. So in the beginning of the notes, it's this university professor who stands up at a podium and thanks everyone for coming to this speech that's going to be given by another professor who specializes in Gileadian research, right? Essentially, he's telling us that we found this tale. It was in tapes, and then the different historians had to transcribe them to notes. There weren't even numbers on the tapes, so they had to put them together to try to figure out what order it was. And then they found this tale, when they put it all together, of this girl named Offred. They don't know what her name was before, but they know she was one of the first women rounded up as a handmaid.
Is that why it jumps back and forth, too?
That's why it jumps back and forth in time and stuff, because they're putting together what they think is the right order for these tapes because they found them in an army surplus locker in Maine. They don't know if she crossed the border to Canada. They don't know if Offred went to England. They know that Offred didn't say her real name or if she survived because she still had her child out there and she still wasn't sure about Luke being alive.
Right.
What?
So, yeah, because basically then they're talking about why wouldn't she come, why wouldn't she go public with this story, but hopefully it's because she did get out, and she was worried about the safety of her child and hopefully Luke, because she didn't know if he was still surviving. Although
they said it was improbable that he would have survived. Well, I want to say that. They did. They say because of a bunch of reasons. So I'm going to read a little paragraph, right?
Yeah.
Why did I want to read this? Oh, because what Tessa was telling me, I haven't seen the show yet. I'm going to start now that we finished the book. But she talked about how there were different messages in the book.
Oh,
and
definitely need to talk about this.
Yeah, different messages in the book and then in the show. Apparently the show doesn't go as much into race, but based on the historical notes, there is a huge... Let us have hope, Alberto. Jeez, Lucas.
Yeah, I mean, I think... No, you're taking a realistic view, but...
Anyway.
It's just sad. Also, it also is confusing because I really wish we knew more about what happened to Nick. Because when we finished the book, I asked you, do you think Nick, do you believe that he was actually helping her? Why didn't he talk? Like when she would go over to his house, she would tell him all this information and he would just sit there and listen and not say anything.
Which made me not trust Nick.
Yeah, of
I
course.
didn't trust Nick at all. And
then Alberto was like, well, maybe he's an eye and he's collecting information because she told him about Ofglin. And then Ofglin
gets kidnapped by the black van.
She
and
hangs herself before.
Well, she knows the black van is coming for her. The eyes are coming for her.
You don't want to go in that van.
Well, in the historical notes... Can I say that?
Yeah.
In the
No, I know. I'm just mad
at Nick.
No, I'm not mad at him. I'm mad if that were to happen. But she goes off into this van, and then we have these stories. So there's no way.
Exactly. So everyone not trusting Nick. In the historical notes, the college professors now of this post-Gilead time. So North America is now a new thing, which is interesting that always happens. But in this post-Gilead time, these two college professors are like, Nick was most likely not only a member of the May Day Society, which is the one that was quasi-military, trying to disrupt the regime from within, but he was probably also a double spy. He was probably also an eye.
Don't trust anyone.
And that's why he was able to know that Offred was probably going to be kidnapped, and that's why he got her out. Mm-hmm. That's why he's like, trust me. That's why he did all these things. That's why he was able to do things for the commander, and Mayday was something he said because he was part of that. So they say Nick was probably both. And they also talk a lot about the commander. Specifically at the time, they're like, we don't know which commander it could have been because historically we know there were two people that Offred could have been from. Fred Mana or Fred this guy.
Right, two Freds that were very influential in the top part of that regime.
She says that they were part of a society called the Sons of Jacob. And they were the ones that had meetings that
decided the
rules for the Galadian society. Mm-hmm. And they said they were the ones that also created the possibility to destroy Congress and have the Constitution suspended so that they can impose their regime. If you haven't read the historical notes after the slide, go read them so that you can dive in and then understand what Margaret Atwood was saying. It's not... Her book is not one of, we're doomed. Her book is one of, there's hope. And the resilience of the human spirit, the need for freedom, the need for love, which in both of the books we've read that are dystopian talk about as this strange other thing, are so innately human that we will always fight for that, and that we should always fight for that, and that at the end of it, we still end up okay.
I also thought it was clever that she then puts us in this setting where I felt like I'm sitting there waiting to hear this professor speak about this historical event, and I then flash back to multiple times that I had been in a classroom or in a lecture hall listening to someone talk about some moment in history and being like, okay, fine, pay attention, Tessa, this is important. And then when you read the book and then it tells you how important it is to pay attention to these type of lectures, these type of this information, because that's where the complacency comes in. If you sit back and you're like, well, this will never happen.
So the last line of it goes like this: all historians know the past is a great darkness and filled with echoes. Voices may reach us from it, but what they say to us is imbued with the obscurity of the matrix out of which they come. And try as we may, we cannot always decipher them precisely in the clearer light of our own day. So what she's saying is our only chance to learn is looking back at this historical past that is often hard to read, and the worst parts are always try to hide them and destroy them from being known. But we have to look back at the past in order to learn and move forward in the future and study it. So, if there's one thing I want us to understand from the books that we've chosen to read together, it's that we must look at history not as boring stuff that happened to people who died before us, but as lessons and gifts the people before us left to move forward and live better lives.
Yeah, to help us not continuously make the same mistakes on a loop, which it feels like everything feels very cyclical. And this book coming out, and I think this show coming out at such a specific time, is such a great reminder that it can happen at different times, and you have to learn from the people before you.
Okay, I'm going to start now reading History is His Story. Moira became a letdown for both the reader and Offred. She needed to be this model, this hero for her, and she was almost accepting her fate. It's sad. Whew. I will say that I did feel bad for Moira at the end. She did feel like defeated when she accepted her place in the Jezebels. Like every important moment in our history is the darkest can be, not making the same mistakes. Who writes the historical notes? Margaret Atwood wrote them. Do the same, learn from the past. Totally. We're about a half hour now. Do we want to go into quotes? Do I watch the TV show? Not yet. Let's talk. Do we want to talk more about Moira? Do we want to? What else do we want to talk about? Do you have anything else you wanted to? You have a list.
Yeah. Well, we put Moira on the list actually.
Okay.
Moira is an interesting character to me, especially comparing the TV show to the book and reading the historical notes. Margaret outlines how actually influential race was to this whole regime, and how most of it came from this racist society that very much existed before Gilead took over. So basically, do you want to should we dive into that? Because they don't do it in the TV show. I think probably because I don't know if they wanted to have a more diverse cast, and if they had gone in this way, it wouldn't have totally limited them. But
I think it's interesting that Atwood kind of was grabbing onto that idea that the racist undertones of the country could be abused and used for a gain of power in a very specific way, especially when that power was being challenged because of their numbers of growth.
So basically what Margaret said in the historical notes is that the fertility rates as a whole, which is what I thought reading the book and watching the show, I just thought fertility rates across the board were down significantly. But in the historical notes, it says actually only
Caucasian fertility rates
were down. So this whole regime was set up so that there would be more Caucasian babies.
And a continuing of Caucasian babies. They could actually be like, okay, we're going to have all of these handmaids here so that we can continue this idea.
Right, which, I mean, is echoing so many events in history that's happened where they basically, like, they'll give it these fancy names like purification of blah, 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 but it's basically like
genocide.
Yes. and picking a race that they think is superior and trying to eliminate.
Oh, Kenzie, Courtney, thank you for bringing it. Thank you for bringing us up. That's such a brilliant thing. I think that's why it's so important to be cautious and think critically. The professor didn't want to pass harsh judgment on the past, and empathy for Gilead can lead to the society being repeated. He wanted you to understand it. Like, he wanted you to not judge them, but to say, why did they move to these things? Why did they accept these things? Also, Rita, you said something about misogyny playing an event, which is true. But one thing Tessa and I talked about were that in this regime, like, no one wins. The only people that wins are the people at the absolute top, the elite, and then everyone else kind of just like has to deal with it. And remember how they were even like subverting the men at one point? Where we talked about something like that in a better way, and I can't remember what I had said.
Well, because the women are so oppressed in this regime. And then we were like, but who's actually having any sort of satisfaction from this?
Because even the men at the top have to escape, and it eventually leads to a lot of their demise. We were learning the historical notes that these first group of men that started Gilead and that were the leaders, eventually, by the new up-and-comers, were kicked out and killed because they were all breaking rules that they had wrote. They weren't pure. They were, they had the Jezebels. That's why the commander, they think, was eventually killed.
I feel like maybe, like, the people, it's usually the people at the top who are benefiting, and everybody below, regardless if they're a man or a woman, are not benefiting from this, obviously. But I think the people at the top made these really restrictive rules because they thought they could break them. Mm-hmm. They didn't think they would apply to them. And at first, according to these notes, at first that is true, but then they started doing a purge on commanders who were not respecting the rules that they themselves had made.
Which is something
Waterford
that
being one of them.
I think in society always we should make sure that everyone is held accountable to rule of law. That is the one thing that keeps us together, the set of rules that we all agree to live upon. Like in the United States, we have our Constitution that protects the citizens and protects our freedoms from the abuse of power. Mm-hmm. And that's a really big thing. So the minute that they said they suspended the Constitution, my red flags were like, that's awful. That's never allowed. But these are all books. Remember we talked about that when we read 1984 and stuff about the different types of fiction. What if this should continue? This is like a what if / if this should continue / oh my God, I hope this never happens. I think that Margaret is more positive than Orwell about the future. At the end of 1984, Winston became loyal to the big brother, but June was able to escape. There's a chance, a little bit of hope. See, Lopresti Mariana, in the articles that I read about 1984 and Margaret Atwood's take, she feels that she is just as hopeful as Orwell. I just moved, so my books are away. I haven't gotten to go back to read it yet. But she says, like, the way that last chapter is written in the past tense, as if he's reflecting back on what had happened. So she thinks that it was hopeful. Winston did survive and win and subvert the party.
Which is where she was inspired to write the end.
Which is how she was inspired to write the end.
I'm sure you guys are the same way. I was like, what? Oh my God. Because, of course, as we're seeing her start to try to hold on to sanity and you can watch her thoughts flicker about, then at the end I'm like, oh man, it's totally changed its structure of how it's being written because that was her essay. Mm-hmm. And so that leads me to believe that there's no way that that Nick was definitely on her side, that she at least escaped for enough time to make these.
I wish we knew more about the old Ofglin. I do too. Moira was the most interesting character in my opinion. Most interesting character? I think Moira offered some sort of rebellion that we all wanted. We wanted someone to be saying like a big middle finger to this regime, and Offred was still very pious until the end of the book, But Moira was always the person that Offred looked to help inspire that strength and to help inspire, like her. Remember, she's like, even when she saw Moira accepting her role in the Jezebels, how disappointed Offred was because now her hero had given up. So where was she going to find the strength to continue if Moira had given up?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that I liked that Offred. The book starts out, one of the first things she says is, my name is blah, 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 and my intention is to survive. I'm going to look. Keep going. Paraphrasing. But, so to me, her being more reserved was just, she wasn't giving into it right away. She just was being smart about it. Mm-hmm. And Moira escaped very early on in the process before the wrinkles were ironed out in the whole system. So she was able to find those loopholes and to be a little bit more bold in the way that she went about her rebellion. But it didn't end up, not saying that, I mean, even if she had been more reserved, it still could have definitely failed. But I think that Offred's plan was a little bit more long
Oh
term.
boy, sorry, I really fell back in the comments, guys, so I'm diving all the way to the end.
Yeah.
Moira is a fake hero. She lost hope and stopped fighting. Unlike of Warren, she kept fighting until the very end. Do you think they caught Moira showing June's mom in that video was intentional or just random? Like, look, we have this person we know was in your life. We can take anything you want. Oh, so you think that the regime specifically showed her mother to Moira to
I
be
wondered
like...
that too, and I wondered if her mom was actually just a really well-known
like activist. Because, well, then I guess Moira and her would have been of the same cloth in that sense.
Right. Which is...
I don't think Offred got captured. I don't think so either. I think she was free. And I think that she...
I would like to believe
I would like to believe...
I mean, regardless of Offred's story, I mean, she's one of many, 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 many women, some of which were able to escape. And basically these women had this revelation, some of them did, of thinking outside of just themselves. So it went from being like, for her story no longer was the most important. It was, how can I help the people around me? How can I send this message out to help the other women here or help the other people here? And I don't think she was thinking as much about herself anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, she wasn't.
So for her, getting this out there in some form was more about the collective, which I think is really cool.
Also, I just want to say something that
Yeah.
Camille, when you're quoting the book, by telling you anything at all, I'm at least believing in you. I believe you're there. I believe you into
Yes,
being.
Okay, thank you. You found the quote that I was trying to find.
Let me see where the second half is, because it's coming.
Yeah.
No, it's not. I haven't found the second part of the quote. But have any of you seen the movie V for Vendetta? Reading that part, her reading that, reminded me of the moment when Natalie Portman is in the regime's cells. I'm not going to talk, I don't want to spoil the movie if you haven't seen it. It's incredible. But it was when she's in the regime cells and she finds the other woman's note that was written to her on like the toilet paper. And she reads it, and it's that idea, the fact that she's like, I believe you into being, I do that. That is the strongest, I think, superpower humans have, and it's hope. One of the biggest things that Margaret Atwood took from 1984 is this idea of hope. And that she really actively wanted to put in her book, this idea of hope towards the end. Because I'm telling you this story, I will your existence. I tell, therefore you are. This made me think of Descartes and the way he says, I think, therefore I am. Telling her story made her real. Mm-hmm. It's true.
I thank you so much for finding that, because that's the quote I was trying to find that I couldn't in the book, so thank you. Also, I do understand you guys being frustrated with Moira giving in, but
we don't know what she went through. Remember, she was caught more than once.
Yeah.
And remember the first time they told us how badly they beat her feet, that she limped for months after. We have no idea what she did to her, what they did to her. And remember, Moira talks about it. She's like, in her own ways, where she's still keeping her strength, not letting Offred know how bad it was, the things they did to her. But she's like, I know I gave everything up. Me. And it was that moment in 1984 when Winston gives up Julia because, what's his name is beating him. He's like, oh, it was all her. He's like, you say anything, they will get you to say things that aren't even real. So we can't judge or be upset with Moira because she was broken, because at the end of the day, that was the constant intention of that regime, was to break everyone into this thing.
And there's different ways to survive. And, sorry.
No, I was going to say,
yeah,
but her breaking was still something that inspired Offred to hope. Can
you keep explaining that?
Well, yeah, because she was like, oh, even Moira, maybe I should. No, I can't. I'm not gonna, Mm-hmm. She's like, Moira should be doing this for me, not me for me. Like, I have to take responsibility in a way. Like, I'm gonna keep hoping and thinking or did she give up?
I don't know, but it could have helped Offred know that she actually still was in a position of slightly more power, mm-hmm. because her role as a handmaid actually wasn't without some form of power in that society, and information that she could gain. So I think her being more reserved about her tactic, although at the end she kind of did let loose a bit and just stopped realizing that she was taking way too many risks.
If you go through what they said in the historical notes, maybe she was in this room recording her story and they're like, you don't have as much time now, they're coming, so you have to finish. Maybe that's why she's like, okay, well this is. She just starts spitting stuff out because she knows she has to leave. I don't think Moira was broken. Oh, cool, why not?
Yes. So, right, I think we're so lucky to be able to sit here totally not affected by this regime and judge what people are doing in it, but I don't know what my limit would be in that type of situation. I don't know if I would, which character I would relate to most in this at all. And I think this is what I was going to say earlier. There's more than one way to survive. You can survive by escaping and getting back to, to get out of that. But you can also survive by saying, okay, well, I'm going to be here for this moment, for this undetermined amount of time, and I'm not going to allow them to take away every ounce of happiness. So,
or I'm going to allow myself to create this space for me, like
to create a life here, and to somehow find.
In the footnotes, that's how they talk about the aunts. They're like, some of the aunts are people that actually believed in what the regime was saying, for lack of a better word, traditional values. But some aunts were just older women who couldn't have children, that didn't want to get sent to the colonies. So they chose to be aunts, to create this space for themselves, to live this way so that they can do it. And that's one of the ways that the regime had power, was by having people control themselves, having aunts control the handmaids and become their own little thing. In this regime, none of us would know it would break us. True.
I mean, it's just like impossible to really know.
It's like how Offred reverts back into her own mind. And that's her way of surviving. That's a good point. We don't know how we'll deal with the situation till we experience it. There are more than one way to survive. That's such an excellent point, Tessa. But Janine is underrated. How?
Janine is a really interesting...
Did anyone catch the "and so it goes"? I totally
Yes, I thought.
Well, don't forget that she was writing 1984 with all of the influence, and that's the thing. Like, are you starting to notice all of the books we've read where they influence each other because they're all fantastic writers who read each other and are like. She talks about how much Orwell is her hero. She talks about how much all the other authors that she's read do influence her and her writing. And yeah, I totally saw that too. Thank you for bringing that up.
Janine was definitely more broke than
Moira.
It's Janina. I loved that they started going in a little bit more into probably what was her background before, which is, I think that she was in a lot of abusive type of, not just romantic relationships, just relationships in general, where she felt any sort of validation that someone would give her, any sort of praise, she genuinely took that in, and it fueled her. So it didn't matter who it came from, and that's when she starts losing that sense of perspective, because when Aunt Lydia is saying, "Oh, thank you, you did good, kid," she's like genuinely feeling.
She's like, "That's right, I did."
That's right, and so she starts believing in this whole world because it gives her some sort of praise.
So Kat Parker now talking about Offred. I think her narrative kept her sane.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking to someone who didn't necessarily exist, allowing her some kind of freedom of speech, allowed her to share and compartmentalize. Absolutely. Through this book, I saw how important it is to hold on to hope.
Yeah, that's why she doesn't allow... She has all these versions of Luke where he is living. She has all these versions of Moira where until she met her in Jezebel, where hopefully she escapes, because she has to have hope, or she's what's going to keep her going.
Tess, do you think through the show we can get some answers about the whole story?
Well, the cool thing about the show is that Margaret Atwood is
one of the writers.
Yeah, she's involved in that. So,
she's involved in the process.
Which I love, because then it feels like we get even more, although we get so much information from these historical notes, but it feels like we get to then feel that lived out. So everything, this is what I read read in an interview, but they said everything in season 2, because season 1 is the book, and then season 2 they said they don't make up new stuff, they draw from what you have in the book, and they just maybe expand on that or show those parts of the book that we didn't have time to maybe explore as much. Yeah, because Janine was, oh sorry, I read the comment and don't. Rita was talking about how Aunt Lydia was telling Janine it's her fault, and that was when Janine told her story about being
gang raped.
Right. Did we ever learn if that story was
true? No.
Because the other thing that Janine would do is embellish so that she looked like this true believer. And Aunt Lydia praised women who had some sort of transformation.
Yeah.
What else? Aunt Lydia was the worst. But I do think that Aunt Lydia was...
I feel bad for her too.
I think she was a true believer, though, in this, the way that they describe her. I think when she... I don't think she's one of the aunts that chose that to...
Sorry, I tried to... I know people were commenting on it.
What are you thinking about Elizabeth Moss? Love her.
Let's create an anti-Lydia club today. Aunt Lydia was loving her position. She was loving her power and what she was able to do. Okay, so they talk about that in the notes too at the end. They say that often regimes of power use the people that they're oppressing to also help oppress. Yes. Because when power is limited, a little bit of it will go a long way, and people will crave even that slight bit of power.
So in this story, the women actually a lot of the time were the ones to oppress their fellow women. And they're saying that happens actually in basically every
But I think that's something we have to be aware of in society too.
We still do it.
Yeah.
Something that my girlfriends and I always say is that there's room for everyone. And specifically we're talking, I think, amongst ourselves as women, because we don't ever want to get caught up in bringing each other down. We want to lift each other up, and there's room for everyone, everyone's success, everyone's has space.
Mm-hmm. So the name remains. Thank you for quoting it. What it says the institute. To institute an effective totalitarian system, or indeed any system at all, you must offer some benefits and freedoms, at least to a privileged few, in return for those you remove.
Yeah.
The best and most cost-effective way to control women for reproductive and other purposes
was
through women themselves.
Yes.
Guys, we have about 7 minutes left. So Tessa, one final note on the book.
That just made me sad. Yeah, I think that's a great note also to remember now, and to not fall
into that trap.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's definitely difficult and something we have to be conscious of. And I think that's what reading books like this does, is it makes us conscious of these things that we would otherwise not be aware of. Mm-hmm. It's put us in a narrative. It's brought us into a world where the things that we do see in our world that aren't right up front are put a microscope, and they create all of the possibilities of what that could be if we continue that way, or if we allow something to happen that way. My friends and I are like that, Tessa, and we recently stood together against.
Yeah, so this comment I think is more talking about how if women band together, because basically, in order to help with sexism, they start to tell women, well, if you dress this way, if you do this, blah, 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 that makes you a slut, or whatever words they like to use. But then when we're actually taking that to heart, we start using them amongst ourselves. And that that's the worst way to continue this narrative. Whereas if women start raising each other up, start supporting each other, then we also can create that change to make women feel respected, and to respect each other, and to respect ourselves. And I think the power in community, in women coming together, that is beautiful, and I think that is such a that's definitely a takeaway from this book. There's room for everyone.
There's room for everyone. Also, someone said, let's talk about the salvaging. In the historical notes, they talk about why salvaging was important, because it allowed these handmaids, who no doubt had some sort of aggressive tendencies towards the men that were using them, and they were able to kind of use this salvaging of the rapist or of the man that they're beating in that room to kind of let go of this anger onto this person, to kind of like
scapegoat.
A scapegoat. So that's why they have the salvagings, and to let the handmaids take care of it.
Yeah, so that actually...
And we saw Offred even fall into it. She's like, oh, the life of the child, and she even got angry. And even though she never really wanted to hurt anyone, that, what's it called? The mass mind, whatever it is, the mind of everyone, that allowed her to like give into this and throw a few punches herself.
Yeah, and they give a physical being there to say, this is who you should be angry at, not us. Even though that guy was probably part of Mayday. But that technique, like everything in this book, is not made up. That's a real technique that these type of regimes use. As complacency, such a...
All right, guys, we have about
theme.
5. Mob mentality. That's it. Thank you, Kenzie Courtney. Yes, there's room for everyone, and there's also not just one type of woman. That part of Lord of the Flies. See? Yeah. Sorry.
And all of that, it all comes back to, it's not about, do you take off clothing to empower yourself? Do you put it on to empower yourself? It's about having the choice. So trying to reserve judgment of fellow people so that we understand that having a choice, point blank, is really what empowers us.
All right, guys. 2 minutes of hate, exactly. The same thing. The same thing. The amount of time to get their anger and stuff on something that benefits the regime. Well, at this point, we have a few minutes left, so we're going to talk about the end of the book. Thank you guys for reading yet another book with us. And now we move on to the next book. Still sad, but a little bit lighter on topic.
Sorry.
Life of Pi by Jan Martel. Everyone, we will be reading about 115 pages of this book, or to chapter 45 by Sunday. For me, it's page 119, chapter 45. Whoop, 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 whoop. This book is by Jan Martel. I will be reaching out to someone to be the person that will introduce us to the author, the context of the book, and a few other things, so you'll know. The first part for next week, if you guys could tweet it, and I'll retweet it, if you guys can get it out there, that chapter 45 or page 119 in my version. It may be another page, but read to chapter 45. It's only 118 pages. We've been reading more per section for Handmaid's Tale. So we're going to take a little relax, and I think we should finish this book in about 3 weeks too, which is cool. We're on a good schedule. We're doing well. All right, everyone, the Rita's telling us that the PDFs are already on Rosende Reads PDFs, so if you're looking for it in other languages, you can dive in there. I want to say this. Thank you again for reading with us. Let's thank Tessa for joining us and giving us an awesome perspective into this book.
Yeah, thanks so much to you guys. There's been so many incredible, insightful comments and things that I've seen on Twitter. Some of you wrote these beautiful paragraphs about how you discovered your own self-worth and talking about femininity and not being anti-men and about empowering everybody. And I think that's was really cool to read. So thank you guys.
So, we still have like a couple minutes. I don't want to end before it's too late.
You want to talk about
I don't know what to talk about.
It just usually cuts us off like
my mom wanted to see the shirt. She mentioned this, so let's make America read again. Hey. Tessa will be hopefully joining again if she has time.
This is your book club. I don't want to.
But we will be reading Life of Pi. Let me see something.
Well, I'm going to read along.
So what we have also I will talk about it next time. I don't want to dive into this book before we really finish The Handmaid's Tale. We have a couple minutes. I don't want to end it early. So if any of you guys have if anyone.
Last comments or
Any of you all have any last comments? Maybe favorite quotes? Something we feel like we didn't get to talk about? If you want to say it right now, you can.
Oh, do you want to sing, Alberto?
No. Where can we buy this shirt? I think I found this on Amazon. I think I bought it on Amazon. Better never means better for everyone. It always means worse for some. True. And that was, I actually got mad at the, I feel like there were times when there was like an immaturity or an ignorance that made the commander feel young to me. And I despised him for it because his privilege allowed him that ignorance and that immaturity and that stupidity that is quite often seen as a negative comment with men in power. Is this ignorance that makes them seem boyish and childlike.
I know. I always, whenever, I don't know how to phrase this. I want to be careful. But
I think the book shows us that people do not have to be a direct hero. The act of remembering and sharing your story with others while you are being silenced is extremely brave and heroic itself. True. I want to talk and know all about Harry Cabert.
You guys watching?
I hope so. It's really good. This power clouds their maturity. It goes to their heads. Tessa coming to London next month. Maybe. We all see Isaiah's face when she mentions Luke. I did at the beginning, I'm not going to lie. The world is full of weapons if you're looking for them. What about Offred getting to see a picture of her daughter? Oh, thank you for bringing that up.
Man, there's so many good moments that it's like it's impossible to cover it.
I feel like in like 5 years we're gonna have a Rosende Reads reread, where we're gonna reread 1984. We're gonna reread *Handmaid's Tale*. We're gonna reread some of the fictions and stuff that really got to us. We have 2 minutes now remaining, so now we will go.
Oh, cool.
I will say this because I just got on that tangent. I'm thinking of having maybe like a biography in the coming year, in like 2019, maybe something nonfiction, because we've been reading a lot of fiction. So we're going to move into maybe nonfiction, but the next book, Life of Pi. The book after that, Things Fall Apart. The book after that, The Count of Monte Cristo. I'm going to show you my copy of it real quick.
It's interesting though, because even though all these books being, well, this isn't really, this is someone's story, but these fictional stories that are still very much.
You see how big this one is, guys? It's because we are not reading the abridged version. We are reading the unabridged version that is about 618 pages in mine. So this will take us a bit of time, but it's an incredible book, so you're going to love it. Maybe some fantasy. I want you guys to know, I know you guys are like, fantasy, we should read Shadowhunter or something like that. I'm trying to stay away from books or stories that are multiple books because we want to be able to keep moving forward.
Yeah, that book is after Life of Pi. Life of Pi is next.
So Life of Pi, then Things Fall Apart, which I have over there as well, and then A Count of Monte Cristo. Thank you all for joining. Now remember, continue to question everything. Continue to learn as much as you can. Continue to be curious. Continue to
listen to stories that
you don't normally hear.
Yeah, that aren't from your own shoes.
And as always, continue to be positive forces of change in your environment. And have a great weekend and a great week. Enjoy the book.
Support each other. Lift each other up.
Remember, there's room for everyone.
I like that.
All right. Have a good weekend, guys. We will see you next time.
Hey.